Okay. Give this just a second. There we go. Okay, so if I can have everybody's attention just really quick, I want to kind of spend a little bit of time talking about what we're going to be doing in class this week. Now, as a reminder, I hope that everybody turned in the introduction draft by yesterday. I haven't had a chance since you guys just turned those in last night to get feedback on those, but I will be trying to get that done as soon as possible. If you did not turn it in, all is not lost. I haven't had a chance to do this yet, but those assignments are only going to be worth 1 point. The reason being, what is my primary focus in having you turn them in? What am I trying to do?
Accountability of where we're at.
Number one, accountability of where you're at, making sure that you're moving forward so that you get the final project done on time. Okay? There's another reason.
To get feedback from you so we can improve it.
Yeah, my goal is I want your final project to be as correct as possible. Okay, I do not want any surprises for you where you did something and then found out I was doing it wrong or I was going in the wrong direction. I want to be able to give you feedback to make sure that you understand how to do these things. Okay, this gives me that chance to give you that feedback before you have to turn in the big project at the end. Okay. That's why I'm going to cut down the points so that way, if you don't turn it in, I do not want this to hurt your grade. Okay? I want the focus to be on the final draft that you turn in, but I want to be able to make sure that I'm giving you feedback. Okay? All right, so today, this section, what are we going to be doing in this section? Subtle hint, it's in big black letters.
Literature review.
The literature review. What are we talking about when we talk about a literature review? What are we doing here? Javier.
I would say doing research.
You're showing that you've done research and that you understand information related to the phenomenon. You're trying to kind of create and establish the edge of a hole that you're trying to fill in. Okay, so we're trying to show that we understand the whole by doing research on the areas around it so we can say, look, there's this gaping hole that we don't know, but here's what we do. Okay, and so we're going to be looking at 5 different areas. What's the first area that we're looking at?
Theoretical influences.
The theoretical influences. This goes back to one of the big 4 that we talked about in our case studies. Okay, someone want to remind me what those are? Mr. Lambert, it's been way too long. Post-positivist. Starts with an I. Interpretivist. Critical theorist. Postmodernism. Now, what's nice is, how many sources am I expecting you to include in this section? 2, right? You should have those sources already. Why? Nope, not the book. You used them in your case studies. You use those sources to explain or define the concept in your case study. So I want you to pull 2 of those sources. You should have 4 for every single theory. So this very first one should be incredibly easy for you to do. You've already done the research. Okay? What's the second one? The topic of your research. This comes from where? The topic of your research. Comes from the research question, and it's how the research question ties to the textbook. So this is the one where you're defining the concept as it's described in the textbook and looking at what people outside the textbook have said about the topic. So for example, Joseph, you're talking about stress. So I'm going to be going and finding outside sources that talk about stress as it relates to the way it's described in the textbook. Okay, Tristan, you're talking about, I can't remember, remote learning or remote working and creating culture. Okay, so we're going to be so you're going to go and find sources that talk about workplace culture. Such like and so forth. Does this make sense? This is where you show a connection between what your research question is and the concept as it's described in the textbook. Okay, how many of those do you have to have? 2. What does number C talk about? Somebody online. Letter C talks about, Shane, if you're talking, you're muted. Anybody online? I need somebody. Section C focuses on what type of source? Shane.
Environment.
The setting and environment. What does that mean?
It's where your research takes place or what you're studying.
Okay, it's where it happens. So I want to look at what research has been. So for example, I'm going to pick on Tristan for a second. Tristan is talking about, actually, and Christy is too, remote work. So we're going to do some research on home-based or remote employment. Has research been, does it have to talk about the specific idea you're talking about? What are you trying to show? Okay, so remember, we're trying to show what we understand about everything, right? So we've already said we want to talk about, we understand theory. We want to show that we understand the topic that we're talking about. What are we trying to show by talking about the setting or environment?
We have an understanding of like what it's like to work at home.
Okay, it's not about whether or not you understand what it's like to work at home, but what research has been done about working from home. Regardless of what it was looking at, what does it tell us that people have discovered about work that doesn't take place in kind of the brick and mortar building that we kind of think of when we talk about workplaces? Okay, so we're trying to show that we've done some research about home-based or remote. Those are not necessarily synonymous. Now, what does the word synonymous mean?
Interchangeable.
They are not necessarily interchangeable. Working from home and working remote are not always the same thing. Okay? So we want to go and do some research about the area or environment, the location where our phenomenon occurs. Okay? What about letter D? What are we looking at there? The sample and population, which means what?
Will it actually do the formal?
The people that we want to examine, right? So if we're looking at where this thing happens, we also want to do some research to understand what has been done about the people that we're looking at. Does your sample require a specific type of person? When I did my dissertation, I had to find a very small, select group of people. People who had taught in regular college settings and in developmental settings. So I couldn't just talk to any college professor. I had to find the very specific, unique group of people. So I had to go and look and say, well, what has been written about that subject? And one of the things I discovered is, guess what? Nobody had ever talked about that. There were people that talked about developmental instruction, people that talked about mainstream instruction, but nobody really talked about the idea that there were people that worked in both settings. And that's what I wanted to get at, but I had to prove that that was the case. So I ended up pulling information about people that worked in developmental, people that worked in mainstream, to show, here's what I know about this group, here's what I know about this group. This is why finding that group that fits into both could be really helpful and interesting to look at. Does that make sense? Okay. What's this last one? Methodological orientation. What are we talking about with methodological orientation? Are we talking about your research method? How you're going to do your research? These are questions about the what? The general approach. I want you to tell me, are you planning on using qualitative or quantitative or mix? So you're going to have to tell me what is it about your question that tells me that the answer is going to be qualitative, quantitative, or a combination of the two. How can, this gets back to ontological orientation. Now remind me what ontology means. Can anybody remember? It's what can we know? Okay, epistemology is how can we learn it, and axiology is it helpful or valuable to learn? Ontology is, okay, so I'm going to pick on Joseph for a second. Okay, so Joseph's writing his paper on, I think it's, are we limiting it to PTSD?
Stress and ADHD.
Okay, stress and ADHD. Okay, so I can either do this and I can answer this question, the impact of stress on individuals who have ADHD in the workplace. I can do this in one of two ways. I can say, what effect does stress have on individuals who have ADHD when it comes to productivity? How might I assess that? The impact of stress on productivity among individuals who have ADHD in the workplace. Can I measure that? Yes, I could. How could I do that?
Maybe based on their job performance.
I could look at job performance. So I might have one group of people that I find that have similar jobs, that have ADHD, and I look at their productivity over a 2-month period, let's say. And then I take another group of individuals and I create stress in their workplace. So the only thing that changes between group 1, which is starts with a C. What type of group is that? My control group, the one where They just work like they normally do. And I look at their productivity, and then I get this group and I introduce stress into their workplace, and I look at how well they perform over the same period of time. And then what do I do at the end? What do I want to find out? The change in what? Well, productivity. I want to see the change in productivity between the control group and the group where I've increased stress. And I want to see, does their productivity go up? Does it go down, or does it stay the same? If it goes up, what does that suggest about the impact of stress on productivity with people with ADHD? If productivity goes up among the treatment group, but stays the same in the control group, what does that tell me? What does stress do to people with ADHD? If the productivity goes up in the treatment group but not the control group, it would suggest that stress increases productivity. What if productivity remains the same in the control group, but it goes down in the treatment group over the same period of time? What does that say about stress? Stress drops productivity. Stress has a negative impact on productivity. What if it doesn't change? What if productivity with the control group and productivity with the stress group stay exactly the same? What does that tell me? What?
Stays the same.
It stays the same, which suggests that stress does not have any impact on productivity, right? Okay, so if that's my study, which is totally legitimate, what type of approach is that? Qualitative, quantitative, or mixed? No, it's not going to be mixed. It is quantitative because I'm simply looking at the numbers. If I wanted to go, okay, so that's a quantitative model. Now let's take that same question of the impact of stress on people with ADHD. Let's say I got a group of those people and I went and sat down with each one of them and I talked to them at the beginning, at the 1 month mark, and then at the 2 month mark about how they felt in the workplace if I was increasing stress. Which approach would that be? And I wanted to see how they saw how their attitudes and emotions and behaviors changed over time. Would that be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed? Whose input or information am I getting? If I was to interview the individuals at the beginning, the middle, and the end. Colin, what do you think?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? My mic's cutting. Well, my headset's cutting out.
So just to repeat the question, let's say that I've got a group of people that I know who have ADHD. And so I interview them at the beginning of a 2 week or a 2 month period, like right before Christmas when work gets really, really hectic. I interview them at the beginning. I interview them 1 month into it. And then I interview them after the Christmas holidays are over. And I ask them, what was it like working in a stressful environment when you have ADHD? What approach of those three, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed, which of those three processes do you think would describe the experiment that I just talked about?
I'd probably say qualitative, just because it's something that's like developing over time, I guess.
It's not so much that it develops over time. You're absolutely correct. It is qualitative, but it's because I'm asking them about I'm not testing anything. I'm simply asking people to share their experience. I'm trying to describe the experience itself. I'm not testing anything. That's the common denominator of qualitative. Okay, so based on those two ideas, what do you think a mixed example might be like? Anybody?
Like when you get the individual's input and then you measure like what everybody has to say.
Okay, so it might be like I do the test where I separate them into the two groups. I have the control group and the group where they worked in a more stressful environment. And after I've done everything, I might go to the people in the stress group and say, tell me about your experiences. Tell me what you saw, what you felt, what you thought about as you did this experiment. So I have the results of the test, the comparative test, but then I also get to add some insights from the individuals who experienced it. That would be an example of mixed. It has a quantitative element and a qualitative element. Okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do in this last section, and the reason I went through all of that, is I'm going to want you to look up some sources that talk about your research question and what type of information, qualitative or quantitative, what type of information do you expect to collect, and why is that information valuable? How many sources am I looking for that?
2.
2. Is everybody with me so far? Okay. One of the requirements for this section is that the sources you use must be what? Outside academic. What do I mean by outside? What can you not use as a source in your literature review? The textbook. Okay? So you have to find it out. Can I use the textbook to find sources?
Yes.
Absolutely. To be honest, you would be stupid not to. Okay? But the sources you find need to be academic. This textbook or this PDF describes and defines what an academic source has to be. What are the traits that make something academic? Okay? You cannot just simply get on Google and find 2 sources and use those. Web pages and blogs do not qualify as academic sources. Even something like Business Insider or Forbes would not be considered an academic source. Okay? So this this page talks about the 3 primary forms of what we call academic sources. Okay? Everybody cool with that? Does anybody have any questions so far? Yes.
For each section, can we use the same resource more than once as our academic?
Source?
Yes.
Probably not, because the focus of each of those 5 sections is going to be different enough that it's unlikely you're going to find a source that's going to fit both. Okay? This is an additional source that talks about what is involved or what is entailed in academic sources. Okay? These two pages that I just showed you are kind of complementary. Number 3, Does Wikipedia count as an academic source? By definition, it can't, because it does not have peer review to the same degree that academic sources do. Is Wikipedia curated? Does that mean, do people look at the content of a source on Wikipedia? There are people that go through and look at the content that's being posted on a Wikipedia site, and they can flag things that are incorrect. However, the majority of Wikipedia material can come from anybody, and the peer review process is pretty thin. Okay? So I'm going to tell you that you cannot use Wikipedia as a source for your paper. Does that mean that we should not look at Wikipedia at all? No. Many times, Wikipedia pages have greatly improved the quality because they tend to require outside citation to support the claims that are made on a Wikipedia page. What does that suggest to you? Even though I can't use Wikipedia, what can I use?
The source is Wikipedia.
You can use the sources that we.
Yeah, I can use Wikipedia the same way I use the textbook. I can't cite the textbook, but I can use the content that they found to do my research for me. Absolutely, totally legit and fair. Okay? This item of 10 steps suggests, how can I find sources? My recommendation, for example, is picking a topic from the organizational communications textbook. Stress, culture, teamwork. Remind me?
Followership.
Followership, okay? So I go to the section on followership. I look for any cited material in the followership. I'm going to use yours as an example. And I'm going to find those. Then I'm going to go to another web page called scholar.google.com. And what scholar.google.com does is it's just like Google, but it limits the searches to what type of sources? Academic. So sources that I find here tend to be limited to the kind of sources that are the only ones I'm supposed to use in my paper. This is a huge win. So let's try, for example, I'm going to try Sherwin's. Oops, I can type today. Okay, so I'm going to look for what? The concept of followership and what else? Education, because I want to limit, I'm not going to look for followership in any setting. I want to find about things that are talked about followership and education. So I'm going to search for that. Okay, so this gives me a list of different sources that have those key terms in it. Okay, so I'm looking at teaching followership in leadership education. Sounds promising, right? So there's a couple of things I can do. Over here in this column right here, I see that there is a copy of this article in what type of format?
PDF.
In PDF. What does that probably tell me? If I click on that, what do you think I'm going to get? A PDF copy of this article. Am I going to have to pay for this? No. If it has a PDF link over here, it's free. Rock on. I have a full copy of it. Rock on. I'm not looking at, I have the full thing, right? I am now in the goal, I am in the red zone here. This is an awesome article for me. Okay? This gives me a brief summary of the article. Now, there's a couple of things here that can be very useful. The very first thing is, do you see this quotation marks right there? Let me make this a little bit bigger. If I click on that, I have a citation. Now, does this citation look complete? No. I've got an author and a title. That's a great start. Can I just copy and paste this and be done? No. I might need to do a little bit more work, but at least I've got a start. Okay? Next, I have this idea right here of cited by 38. What does that tell me?
38 other people cited that article.
Now, what does it mean that 38 other people have cited this article? 38 other articles have been written who mention this article. That's 38 other sources that I could pick from. Bada boom, bada bing, I'm already in business, right? Now, that's 38 sources that all cite this specific article. But what if this article really didn't talk about followership in education the way I wanted it to? I can also look at related articles. Other articles that have maybe common key terms or concepts to this one. So if I tap on that, all of a sudden I find an article from the Journal of Leadership Education in 2014, Learning and Developing Followership. What does that, did you think that article might be somewhat relevant to what I'm going to be writing about? Absolutely. Now, let me just minimize this for a second. And bada boom, guess what we have? I have a PDF. So in two articles, I have two articles, both talking about followership. I have full access to both articles. Life is good.
Two sources.
I've got two sources. I might need to do a little bit of work with this one to make sure the citation is complete. But let's take a look at the second one. What do you think about this one? Does this one look complete? I have an author, got a date, got the name of the article, name of the journal, the volume number, and the issue number. Guess what? That is a rock solid source that I can go with. Does this make sense? So the steps that I have right here, this is what I just showed you. Go to Google Scholar, type in the name of the article, look for a full text copy, scan through other entries to see if there's other useful ones, look for related text, look for cited in texts. These are how you find your two sources for each of those sections. Is everybody good with that? The last thing I wanted to show you, and this is what I'm hoping to get from you today, this week, create a Word document titled References. Copy the APA citation from Google Scholar for the first article. You can just copy and paste the APA, that cite section right there, copy and paste that into the references page. Read through the article's abstract. If it has good information from the abstract, if the abstract sounds like it might be helpful to you, read the introduction. Why do I want to start with the abstract? How long is an abstract? At most, it's a paragraph. Why would you want to read that?
for an explanation on the paper?
I want to know what this paper is talking about. Is it likely or possible that this article, even though it has key terms, doesn't talk about it the way I need it to? Absolutely. Do I want to have to read through and slog through the entire thing just to find out, yeah, this didn't help me very much? No, I don't want to waste my time, so I read the abstract first. If the abstract sounds promising, I read the introduction. Introductions are normally 2 to 3 paragraphs long. If that is still on topic for what I want to do, look for headings. Specifically headings called findings or discussion. They tend to happen at the end. Skip over the data. That's agonizing stuff you don't need for this paper. But look at the findings. See what they're suggesting that they discovered as a part of their research. Okay? Once you're done with that, you are going to summarize everything you have learned from the introduction, the findings, and conclusions. You're going to summarize all of that information in a paragraph. Okay? So in so-and-so's article, or actually, let me rephrase this. Here's what an annotation might sound like. Looks something like this. Hold on. Okay.
You make it bigger.
Oh, absolutely. I was just trying to get it pounded out. Okay, so this is a completely and totally made up article. Okay? What do I already know from this what do I already know from this before I even get started? Who wrote it? Jensen.
That was it.
2014. That little thing, this little in-text citation is a breadcrumb that where can I go? To my reference page and find Jensen 2014 and I can find out exactly where this was written. But this is enough to show what do I know about, from reading Jensen's article, what do I know about followership?
Strongest students, internal.
Intrinsic interest in the subject. Meaning what? Students are most likely to be follower or to demonstrate followership if they have a internal or personal reason to be interested in the subject matter. Right? If I take a statistics class and I know that I want to do research, stands to reason I'm probably going to come to class more prepared because I know that this is stuff I want to know. Okay, so I identified, for example, the Jensen says, here are the most common reasons why people, now, this is totally made up. There is no Jensen article in 2014 that says any of this. Doesn't matter. But I'm trying to show what was the most important stuff that I learned if I had read the Jensen article. Again, this is to show my audience that I know what I'm talking about. Okay? Does it have to be really long? No. I want to talk about what do I learn from this article? What does this article teach me that's relevant to the research proposal? Okay? I want 10 of these. 2 of them are from the theoretical framework. 2 of them are about what? The topic. What else?
Research setting.
The setting. What's 4th?
Sample and population.
The people. And then what's the last one? The method. Is this going to be qualitative? Is this going to be quantitative? What do I know about qualitative and quantitative? Does this make sense to everybody? Okay, I will save this copy so that you have reference to kind of what's it supposed to look like. Now, am I supposed to use essay writing where every paragraph transitions to every other paragraph and everything sounds nice and connected? This just gets to what you guys were talking about. No. The purpose of academic writing is it has a whole bunch of sections that kind of work independently. Okay? I don't have to try to kind of create transitions. That's what those headings are for. So I have a heading that says, for example, coming back to the textbook or coming back to the website. Okay, so if I come back to the website, I have a header right here that says theoretical framework. What would I expect both of the paragraphs that appear in this section to do? Right here. Let me use this. What are these 2 paragraphs going to be? Anybody, quick, we're almost out of time. What is this section right here? It's called what? Okay, guys, I just spent the last 50 minutes talking about this.
Literature.
This is the lit review. What is this section going to be about? The theoretical framework. So I'm going to be taking those 2 sources that I have for my case study to help me understand what? My theoretical framework. So I'm going to have one paragraph that describes and summarizes source number one. Second paragraph is going to do what? Summarize source number two. Do I have to connect them together? No. Why not? They're two different sources, and I've already told you why they're connected, because they're both talking about my theoretical framework. Same thing for my research topic. I have two paragraphs. Each one talks about one source. Okay? I'm going to have two that look like this. Source one, source two. And then just lather, rinse, and repeat. It's just that each of these topics introduces a different group of sources. The headers are my transition. This is what makes life a lot easier. Does this make sense? Okay, so for Wednesday, your goal should be to have at least 2 of these completed. I want you to have at least 1 of your sections of lit review. One of these should be done on Wednesday, so you can make sure you're doing it correctly. This one should be the easiest because, what? Why should this very first one that I have highlighted be the easiest one?
We've got 3 sources already.
You should have 4. At least 2. Okay? Does everybody understand what we're trying to do here? Does anybody have any questions? Anybody online? Does anybody online have any questions about this?
So,
Speak.
Not yet.
do you want that? Oh,
Okay, who wants to go first?
you can.
Okay, Tristan, if you need to take off, we'll see you. All right, Shane, you go first.
I just said not yet.
Okay, Shandon, did you have a question?
So, just clarification, do you want that amount of work done by Wednesday or on Wednesday?
I would say by the end of class on Wednesday, you should have that done. If you can have it done ahead of time, that puts you ahead of the curve. But by the end, you should have at least the theoretical framework done. My thinking is if you understand how to do the first one, the other ones are just kind of doing the exact same thing. And it's more likely that you'll get it done by Friday/Sunday.
So, are we taking what like a post positive would say about our research question? Like,
You're saying, okay, I'm going to come at this from a post-positivist, and post-positives tend to say things are going to happen in the best interest of the company. So whenever I'm looking at what needs to be done, I'm looking at it from a post-positivist or an interpretivist. How do we know information? That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
How they would look at.
How do they help me understand the issue? That kind of thing. Yep. All right, that's everything I've got, folks. We'll see you next class.